Power in politics. Will he or won't he? Governor Lamont deciding whether to sign a controversial housing bill. We'll talk to both sides of the debate. This is Connecticut Power and Politics. Hello and welcome to Connecticut Power and Politics. I'm John Craven, in for Mark Sudol, who is on assignment this week. Well, if you've tried to buy a house, you know how hard it is to find one you can actually afford. Now, Governor Lamont is deciding whether to sign a massive and controversial bill to address the crisis. It requires communities to plan and zone for a certain number of affordable housing units. It would also make it easier to convert unused commercial properties into housing. And perhaps most controversially, parking requirements would be eliminated for smaller apartment complexes. House Majority Leader Jason Rojas is with us. He's pushed for these changes for a year. Mr. Majority Leader, there is no question Connecticut does have a housing crisis, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you talk to a lot of people who work in this area, either up at the Capitol or as advocates or as professionals or as home developers or as attorneys who represent people who are trying to build housing, I think there's pretty broad consensus about a number of challenges. One is affordability, and two is access, right? Being able to find an apartment or even find a house that you'd like to purchase. And then once you get to that, there's quite a bit of sticker shock going on with one, the level of rents that are being demanded of people looking for a rental property, or if you're a young family or a young individual trying to buy a house, trying to buy your first house, it just seems insurmountable given where the price points are for houses. And there's a lot of reasons for why that's the case, and we're trying to address them in this legislation. Certainly this bill is not going to solve all of those problems, but I think it'll certainly get us moving in the right direction of trying to address this issue over the short term and the long term. Which is something that is just going to be required because of the nature of housing policy and how long it takes to get housing developed.
All right, so let's talk about this bill because there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. What does it do, and more importantly, what does it not do?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing that it doesn't do is that it requires towns to build massive amounts of housing or be accountable for building it, local taxpayers. It doesn't destroy local zoning and local control. It doesn't put it all with the state of Connecticut. Those are things that it doesn't do. What it does do is provide a number of new tools that municipalities can avail themselves of to actually do what they all purport that they want to do, right? Which is allow for the development of more housing, more moderately priced housing, more affordable housing, allow some multifamily housing as well too. And what this bill does is provide a number of additional avenues for getting there. One of the most contentious issues that is out there is 8-30G, particularly down in Fairfield County, where there are a lot more applications utilizing that existing law to try to build more housing, and try to navigate the overly burdensome process that is local permitting, local zoning, and local processes, which all has the effect of really impacting economic growth. And certainly it impacts the development of housing for families, right, to call home. So when you talk about 8-30G, there's a number of provisions in this bill that actually help communities achieve that goal, which we know is really important to people. This bill includes additional resources to provide technical assistance to some of our smaller towns that don't have the capacity to plan and review housing proposals in their communities. There's additional dollars in the bond bill, about $50 million program that should create more middle housing. So these are lower density, smaller scale housing developments, up to 9 units. But we specifically put money in there for our public housing authorities, which many of our communities have. And those are entities that are locally controlled, that are made up, that are represented by members of the community there that know their community. And that's going to really build truly deeply affordable housing. Because our public housing authorities are serving the needs of members of our community who are at the lowest end of the income spectrum, elderly individuals, as well as families. But this includes resources to do that too, and it actually gives additional points. If a community that doesn't have that has a housing authority that doesn't quite have the capacity to do some additional development or larger scale development, if they partner with another community, another community's housing authority, they're going to get some additional points towards 8-30G moratorium there as well too. So certainly there are some things that I think make people uncomfortable because it's changing how we think about zoning. But there's far more incentives and supports in here than there are mandates.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. House Majority Leader Jason Rojas, always good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for coming on today.
No, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, the biggest opponent to this housing bill is the group CT 169 Strong. Maria Weingarten is one of the group's leaders. Maria, you say this bill could devastate local towns.
It absolutely could. There are parts of this bill that cause parking mandates that are going to impact all of our municipalities. Any development residential under 24 units has no parking that has to be required. Developers will decide how many units they're going to build, how many units of parking they will offer, and that's a real concern.
I mean, the proponents say, not every apartment complex needs that much parking, especially if there are public lots nearby, if you're near a train station. A lot of young people don't have cars these days.
That's true, but we also don't have enough public transit within our state. And even in towns like Bridgeport, we have a coalition that we formed there, and a lot of them work in the service industry, so they have to commute at odd hours when there is no public transit. So many of them have cars, and so it's really not fair to do it to the residents because it really impacts their quality of life.
Another part of this bill is it makes it a lot easier to convert commercial buildings to residential. The Governor Lamont says, there's just a lot of red tape that developers have to go through to have these old factory buildings or whatever that are sitting there unused, they're eyesores. Why not take advantage of those buildings?
Well, this isn't about old factory buildings. This is about converting to 9-unit apartments, up to 9 units as of right. What our concern is that the smaller towns especially, they're little main streets where they have commerce that is needed to protect their budgets and make sure mill rates don't increase. Those may be converted as of right, and that would really adversely impact towns and their budgeting.
Really, it sounds like you think the public ought to have a say in this instead of it just being rubber stamped.
Absolutely. We need the public involved, the public's voice, and it's been really a vilifying of planning and zoning, and it's really not necessary because the P&Z is there to protect our environment, protect our watershed and our water resources, and everything, and it offers more flexibility in planning. What this bill will do with as of right is create the need for more detailed regulations, potentially more of denying actually the different projects that are raised by different communities. So it may not help growth, it may actually hurt it.
And you guys have been really concerned about whether, especially smaller towns, have the infrastructure for this kind of development, like water, environmental concerns.
Those have not been included and considered under fair share, especially, which is really concerning. We have large allocations that have been made of thousands of units. So it's really a faulty allocation that is now going to be, 25% of it is going to be required in the next 5 years, or you have to come up with your own allocation by January. So that's not enough time to do all the planning that needs to be done.
Let me ask you though, because it's got this fair share quota built into the law, but there really isn't any kind of fair share police that's going to enforce it, right?
Well, you have to wonder because 84% of those units are for the most deeply affordable residents in Connecticut. Those are not going to get built without subsidies, and there's no remedy as to how those subsidies are going to be raised or where they're going to come from. So there's a question whether any of those will even be built at all.
So Governor Lamont has until next week to either sign this bill or not sign it and let it become law or veto it. He's expressed some concerns. One of the options is he might just might sign it and ask lawmakers to come back in a special session and make changes. If that happens, what changes specifically are you going to push for?
Well, we have already met with the governor's chief of staff, so we have voiced some of our concerns, and we know that the parking is an issue, the as of right is an issue, the fair share is an issue. There are numerous issues in this bill and actually contradictions in the bill and errors. So there are many things that need to get fixed, and we hope that he will consider vetoing because of that.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Maria. I'm sure this is not the last time that we'll be talking about this issue.
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you.
All right, Maria Weingarten, thank you so much.
So will he or won't he? Should he trust Jason Rojas and his cadre of anti-zoning radicals? Or should he listen to the rational voices unified behind CT 169 Strong with the courage to speak truth to overwhelming political power?